It's the Sittin Sportside podcast, exclusively on 1045theteam.com.
And welcome into the Sittin Sportside podcast. We're gonna pod down the happy music here real quick. Maybe got a little bit too lazy on the song choice there to open up the podcast, but here I am. I'm Eric Hammond, solo here for a short podcast reflecting on the 2017 New York Yankees season. To me, it got cut a little bit shorter than I would have hoped, obviously, as a Yankee fan. Anyone's season would be cut short. Anyone's expectations, when you get to the playoffs, you want to go, and especially when you have a 3-2 lead. Only one more game to go. You love to get to that World Series, and I am kind of trying to speak to that fan out there who may be sick and tired of hearing, oh, well, you weren't supposed to be there, and you were playing with house money. All that stuff was true. That's why I picked the Yankees to get to the World Series before the playoffs started in my bracket, albeit I had them losing to the Dodgers. But I thought to myself, yeah, they are playing with house money, and they have this fun, energetic way of going at it right now with the thumbs down, and because they're this team that felt like they had this nothing to lose attitude. Sure, all of that is true, but I'm looking to speak to that fan out there right now who's not really looking to hear, oh, well, you weren't supposed to be there. I'll get to those fans in a couple minutes, maybe skip ahead 2 minutes. I'll get to you guys because I'm right there with you in that there's a great future for this Yankees team. Anyone can see it. Now, to the people who are really want to hear, like, well, guess what? It's a bit of a complaint because, look, we're Yankee fans. We're all fans. Well, some of you may or may not be Yankee fans listening to this right now, but if you are a Yankee fan listening to this, we expect to be in the playoffs almost every single year. I know, and I say we. I don't necessarily like saying we. That's how I'm putting it, though, right now in this particular instance. Coming into every single season, the Yankees haven't had an under 500 season in forever. And even going down to the end of last season when Gary Sanchez comes up and goes on that massive run, they were into the playoffs really when it came down to it to the last week of the season. I mean, I think it fizzled out at the beginning of that last week, but they were right there. They were there to possibly have an opportunity to make the playoffs. And when you look back at the moves that were made, sure, you got Clint Frazier and sure, you got Justice Sheffield, but the bullpen has kind of struggled down the stretch last year. Dellin Betances really didn't settle into that closer role and unfortunately carried into this season when it comes to not pitching the best out of the bullpen, which you got to hope that will fix itself going into next season. But man, like that was a team that you felt like could have made a run to the playoffs. It was obviously going to be tough to catch the Orioles that year, but still, it just felt like that. Sanchez coming up, and with the young kids, Judge and Austin last year, that maybe if you had Andrew Miller, you still would have been able to maybe get into that playoffs and close out games that you didn't necessarily do last season. Now let's go on to this season, and listen. I can pull it back up. I'm not sure I said it on the I'm pretty sure I mentioned it on the podcast when Gary Sanchez went down with that biceps injury really early in April. But my point is, back into that conversation, it was two things. If you're the New York Yankees and Brian Cashman in the offseason, you decide, hey, we're going to put all our chips in the Gary Sanchez basket. We like Austin Romine enough to put him behind the plate as our backup catcher. So let's trade Brian McCann, a savvy veteran who has done decent for us in 3 years. Not as great as that contract we gave him, but fine. We get to get a big chunk of that contract off the books. We only have to pay $5.5 million this year and next year. We get two young kids who may or may not pan out. They won't be up in the major leagues at the earliest in 2020, though. So that part definitely. But guess what? Let's trade him to the Houston Astros. And my immediate response to that trade from Brian Cashman was, why are you trading him to Houston? And I know he only has 2 years left on his deal, and if you're Brian Cashman and you're not expecting to make the playoffs or whatever, what have you, then you're not really worried about this year or next year and if McCann's going to hurt you or not. But that still was my main concern was, wait, why are we trading him to Houston, this up-and-coming team that had a great 2015, a down 2016? They're going to be right back in there in 2017, and that's only going to help them. What was one of their weakest positions? Catcher, Jason Castro, not strong. Gaddis wasn't great defensively, so they were trying to find other options. Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, obviously, tweet at me at EricH1045. Correct me if I'm wrong. If they had, I'm pretty sure. Hank Conger last year. I think that's what it was. Hank Conger was catching last year. So they had a glaring issue at catcher. But that trade for Brian McCann, even though he wasn't hitting great in this postseason, he came up with a big hit for them in game number 7. And even in game number 6, he had a big hit. He did it, and his bay was there defensively. And what was the difference in this series, if you really want to think about it? It was in game 2, Sanchez not being able to handle that throw defensively, and Altuve scoring on it when he should have been out by a mile. And then it's a great throw from Bregman, but a great play by Brian McCann at home plate, up 1-0 in game number 7, 5th inning, Bird coming home. It was a perfect play, unfortunately, but it was a great defensive play by Brian McCann. That's the difference. And so what's the option? Should you have kept Brian McCann with Sanchez in the wing? That's what you're going to ask me right now. The answer to that question is sure. You had McCann to play catcher and if Sanchez to the DH. So what do you do instead? You go out and get Matt Holliday. And admittingly, I'm a huge Matt Holliday fan. I was so happy when he was panning out in the early months. Then he goes down with that virus or allergic reaction, whatever he had, and it turns into this thing where he couldn't come back from his injury. And really, Joe got in this big kind of, all right, he's not back. He's not back, and we can only play him against left-handed pitching. So he's not good enough to play, so we're going to DH Ellsbury and Headley. And Headley got some big hits down the stretch, big hit in game number 4. Kudos to Headley there. And he started getting on base a lot more at the bottom of the lineup towards the end of this series, but it was still kind of like, why isn't Holliday getting more at-bats? That's beside the point. The point made on this situation is, well, listen, if we're going to pay Matt Holliday $13 million, and we're going to also pay Brian McCann $5.5 million to play for Houston this year, do the math, that's $18.5 million when you could have just paid Brian McCann $17 million. So you're actually losing $1.5 million. You don't have Matt Holliday, but you have Brian McCann instead, who you could catch and then DH Gary Sanchez in the playoff games. That might have worked out better. You have Brian McCann, the better catcher, and guess what? I don't know if things would have changed during the regular season or what would have changed had McCann been on the Yankees and not on the Astros this season, but you have Brian McCann, and I don't know what the option is. Maybe they go out and get Jonathan Lucroy instead of the Rockies. I'm not even sure what would have happened there for their catching prowess and what they would have done per se, but what I do know is that trade still kind of looms large just for 2017. Now, if those two young kids who had decent minor leagues, one of them pitched very well, for rookie ball, I believe, low A, which is actually the Staten Island League, the Penn League, Staten Island Yankees, the New York State Penn League, which the Valley Cats play in. So he pitched okay in that league, and I think he got promoted. One of them, Guzman, I believe, and I should have done the research a little bit better, but Guzman, I believe he had a pretty good year and went up to single A Tampa and did pretty decent there. So maybe these quote-unquote lottery tickets will pan out, but that is where it comes into this deal. And then it gets to Game 7, and I know this is where I'm going to vent a little bit more about Game 7 and finish up this podcast real quick. I promise it'd be a quick podcast. Hopefully I can keep it under double-digit minutes. But what it came down to in Game 7 was, all right, Tommy Kahnle comes in, and he does a great. And let me just preface this by saying CC was incredible for the Yankees all season, sub-4 ERA, which not more you can ask for from CC at this position. Not pitching with a high-speed fastball anymore, low 90s now, using more of the soft stuff. He did a great job not only in the regular season, but some big-time starts. Game 5 wouldn't be in the ALCS without CC's performance in Game 5 in the ALDS. He comes in and doesn't have it, and unfortunately, I was waiting for time when he wasn't going to have it, and unfortunately, it did end up coming in Game number 7. Kahnle, though, same thing. I was a little concerned about him being the first guy out of the bullpen. It'd be Kahnle, Robertson, Chapman, and Kahnle was like, you know what? He was okay at times, but other times he would walk people and give us some big hits. He comes in, gets a big double play, keeps it to 1-0. Then he lets up the home run to Altuve. Correa eventually gets the first. Gurriel on third was Correa, and then Gurriel's at first with McCann up. He gets a big strikeout though of Gaddis, so we got to give Kahnle a lot of credit there. But all of a sudden, Joe Girardi, who we as Yankee fans have killed, and the media really in certain instances, have killed Joe Girardi for some of the mistakes that he made during the playoffs, and is one of them maybe not, because we always criticize him for managing games in the regular season as if they're Game 7 of the World Series or since the ALCS, and it was Game 7 of the ALCS, and even though he got that big strikeout of Kahnle got the big strikeout of Gaddis, I would have thought maybe in that situation, if you're Joe Girardi, you bring in Chapman there, you close the door on McCann, and then it's a 2-0 game. If you can get McCann out and you're Chapman, you hopefully pitch Chapman for 2 more innings, and it's still a 2-0 game. I don't know if you get to McCullers. Obviously, they didn't. But how awesome would that have been if, they could use Chapman? I feel like that's the Girardi move that I was kind of anticipating, and when it didn't happen, I'm like, well, why is Girardi managing different now? Maybe I know he wants to save him for the 9th inning if they get the lead, but that unfortunately never happened. I don't know if it was 2-0 instead of 4-0 if things would have been different. Obviously, the bat never got going against McCullers, and they got some missed opportunities. So the answer to that question probably is they still would have lost 2-0 as compared to 4-0. But those are the two biggest things right there. That trade, I wanted to vent about that. And then the Game 7, I thought Girardi managed it like, ironically, the guy who I criticized, I don't know about everybody else. I don't want to put anybody else in that position. But for me, I always thought that he manages like it's Game 7 every single game. And then when it was a Game 7, he kind of changed his tune a little bit and didn't go to Chapman when I think, back in Game 1, I know he went to Green and not Chapman, but back in Game 1, the wild card game, he went to a big-time situation and get that big time out, which had Green in that first inning to save them and get to the yes and eventually the CS. So it's a disappointing end of the season, and there is that kind of, I don't want to personally hear it as a Yankee fan, but there is that thing of, you know what? You're playing with house money. You weren't supposed to be there. I don't like hearing that after a loss, and then when you're up 3-2 and you could have won, and you only score 3 runs in Houston, there's a lot of frustrating things. I don't want to hear that per se. But the answer to the reason behind that, you're not supposed to be there now, that comment is based because of the future of this New York Yankees team. And that is where I'm going to leave you guys here with right now. The future is definitely bright for the New York Yankees. And let's talk about the 2015 Chicago Cubs. That wasn't supposed to be the Cubs' year. It wasn't supposed to be the year that they won 95-plus games. It wasn't supposed to be the year that they had the 3rd best record in Major League Baseball. It wasn't supposed to be the year they made it to the World Series. They didn't. They made it to the National League Championship Series, though, and it wasn't supposed to be that year. They get swept by the New York Mets, sure, but they weren't supposed to be there. This one went 7 for the Yankees. So, Cubs in 15 overachieved. They win the World Series. Yankees in 2017 overachieved. I'm not saying World Series next year, but it's definitely the start of a great era for if you're a Yankee fan. It's a tough loss now. I'm going to be dwelling on this for another couple of days. The Jets just blew a 14-point lead in the 4th quarter, so that's not going to help on top of it. But I'm gonna sit here and I'm going to continue to think about this, watch the World Series, and enjoy postseason baseball for 7 more games, hopefully, or at least a good series and good games all around. And I'll just know that the Yankees have Greg Bird. Hopefully he stays healthy, right? But Greg Bird coming back, starting first baseman. You have an issue, and you have an issue with the infield. But the issue is you have a lot going around in the infield. It's a great issue to have. Gleyber Torres is going to be back from that Tommy John surgery, and he's going to be an option. Probably not going to be up unless maybe at the earliest May. I would say probably June to play either 3rd or 2nd, whatever Castro's not going to play. I don't know if they're going to bring Frazier back or not. Ironically, I will a dream bat at Yankee Stadium is Mike Moustakas. I don't know who they'd go after, if they want to keep Frazier or just keep it. Headley's last year on his contract, and Torres will eventually take over with Headley being a bench bat the rest of the season. That's more likely where I think Cashman's going to go with it, but don't be surprised if it comes out of left field that they trade Castro and then sign Moustakas or sign Frazier to stay. I don't think they'll sign Frazier to stay, but I would not be surprised if Castro gets quote unquote I don't want to say it'd be unfortunate for Starlin Castro if he gets traded 2nd year in a row after making the LCS and then getting traded, and then that team wins the World Series. In 2015, he was on that Cubs team, gets traded to the New York Yankees, and the Cubs win the World Series. He's the odd man now in this situation, again, if you go after Moustakas. But if you keep it the way it is, Torres will play 3rd, and you still got 2nd. I don't know how the outfield is going to turn out, but you definitely have Judge in right field, and that's not changing anytime soon. And then you have options with Clint Frazier, the redhead. You have the option there. You have Gardner's a big soul part of this team and a mentor of this team. I would imagine he would stay. Ellsbury, you're still on the hook with him with a bunch of money, and you'd imagine Hicks would stay in center field. So I don't know what's good. I think the most likely guy to be traded, now that I think about it, definitely and talk through this, is Starlin Castro. But you'll still have Sanchez at catcher. I would love to know that he's going to try to improve on some things defensively in the offseason, but he's still been overall. He'll get killed for that stuff. He'll continue to get killed for that, but I still think he's a fine catcher, and he'll obviously be a great option as long as he's putting the bat like that. And real quick about the pitching. You bring back a top 3 rotation of Severino, Tanaka, and Gray. All righties, I know, but still a great rotation. You're going to have Chance Adams, the minor leaguer. You're going to have him in the majors next year, no question. You didn't want to bring him up and extend his workload this year, so that was why you didn't bring him up. He'll be up eventually, probably not until June with the whole service time issue with these general managers in the front office wants that, and I get that. Jordan Montgomery, second year, I could see him having a great year as well. You're still going to have Robertson. You're still going to have, hopefully Betances gets back, like I said. You're still going to have Chapman, so you have a lot to love about going forward next year for the New York Yankees with possible additions. And that is my final call there. I think that the Yankees trade Starlin Castro a la trading Brian McCann. Hopefully, if he is traded, he does it like Theo Epstein in a sense of, I'm going to trade Castro where he can't beat me before the World Series. And, maybe Castro gets traded to a team over in the National League, and you play him in the World Series, fine. But, it's a little bit different when you trade him to your league in a possible. If you get traded to the Athletics, that's a little bit different than getting traded to the Astros, like in the a la Brian McCann as well there. But that is my prediction. That I think, that's my bold prediction, that Castro gets traded and they sign Mike Moustakas, and opening day starting second baseman Gleyber Torres. That's my bold prediction. But my regular prediction is the Yankees will be back competing for a playoff spot, over 500 again next year and for years to come. And maybe this is exactly what happened to the Cubs. You lose in the LCS, and then you go on to win the World Series next year. I hope this helped you guys get over your sorrows. I hope you guys complain with me. If you want to complain to me, at EricH1045. Any other thoughts on the New York Yankees season? Of course, Sittin Sportside podcast will still be here on YouTube.com/YouTube.com/Team1045. And you can find all different stuff on 1045theteam.com, and stay tuned to 1045theteam.com as well. So for the Sittin Sportside podcast, the New York Yankees recap, 2017 season recap, I'm Eric Hanman. Thank you for listening on 1045theteam.com.